China continues to take a tough stance against Japan. However, it seems that Japan is gradually preparing a new grand strategy toward China. It looks like Japan is preparing its own unique approach to dealing with China. Let's take a closer look at this topic today. Let's get started. After Japanese Prime Minister Nakachi Sana suggested last year that Japan might intervene militarily if China invades Taiwan, China strongly protested. Because China sees Taiwan as a core interest, it took the Japanese Prime Minister's comments very seriously. China then suspended group tours to Japan and canceled plans to resume Japanese seafood imports. Additionally, China heightened pressure on Japan by tightening export restrictions on strategic materials like rare earths. Restrictions on Japanese movies and performances in the cultural sector also continued, causing relations between the two countries to cool quickly. Of course, after recently allowing tourism again and then banning it once more on June 22, there has been a somewhat strange atmosphere within China. Nevertheless, China continues to maintain a hardline attitude toward Japan. Meanwhile, Japan remains cautious about this atmosphere in China. Regardless of whether China allows tourism to Japan or not, Japan is maintaining its vigilance and appears to be preparing its own grand strategy. In fact, in the field of security, Japan is raising its level of vigilance against China even further. A prime example of this is the draft of the latest defense white paper that the Japanese Ministry of Defense is about to release. The Japanese Ministry of Defense's white paper calls China's growing military activities a major security challenge for Japan. In particular, they have once again used the expression, "the greatest strategic challenge ever" regarding China, showing strong vigilance. It is very unusual for Japan to use such strong language to refer to China, which suggests that they perceive China as a threat. Japan believes that in recent years, the operational range of China's Navy and Air Force has noticeably expanded. Last year, the Chinese Navy deployed the Liaoning and Shandong carrier strike groups for major operations in the Western Pacific. Japan views these actions as proof that the Chinese Navy's blue water capabilities are significantly improving. Japan is especially concerned that Chinese military activities now exceed isolated training exercises. Last year, the Chinese military repeatedly conducted large-scale military exercises in the waters and airspace around Taiwan, and the Japanese Ministry of Defense assessed that China is continuing practical training to enhance its operational capabilities in case of an emergency. Chinese carrier-based aircraft have reportedly targeted Japanese self-defense force jets with radar over international waters, raising concerns about rising risks of accidental military clashes between the two countries. China is not the only country that Japan is concerned about. The Japanese Ministry of Defense also emphasized that military cooperation between Russia and China is becoming increasingly close. Last December, bombers from both countries flew together over the East China Sea toward the Pacific, which Japan views as a form of strategic pressure. Since the war in Ukraine, Russia and China have strengthened military ties, and Japan sees Northeast Asia's security environment as increasingly complex. Because of this, there are strong voices within Japan saying that even if relations with China improve in the future, security issues should be approached as a separate matter. Cooperation is possible in areas like the economy and tourism, but China remains the main focus of military and security vigilance. Japan is actively strengthening its defense, developing long-range strike and drone capabilities, and increasing military cooperation with allies, likely continuing these efforts in the future. Japan has also been quickly increasing security cooperation with the Philippines. Even Japanese media have called this unusual. Prime Minister Takashi Sana and President Ferdinand Marcos agreed to expand military intelligence sharing, defense industry cooperation, and economic security during their summit. Key is the official start of negotiations for a Military Information Protection Agreement, GSOMIA. If signed, the Philippines would be the first Southeast Asian country to sign GSOMIA with Japan. Japan and the Philippines already have a strong security partnership. In 2024, the two countries signed a reciprocal access agreement that facilitates mutual visits and training between their armed forces. This year, they also signed an agreement on mutual provision of supplies and services, allowing them to support each other with military supplies, fuel, and equipment. If GSOMIA is included, the two countries' relationship will come close to a quasi-alliance. Japan has only signed all three agreements: the Reciprocal Access Agreement, Mutual Provision of Supplies and Services, and GSOMIA with the United Kingdom and Australia. Both Japan and the Philippines have signed military information protection agreements with the United States, which is important. If an information sharing system is established between Japan and the Philippines, information exchange among the three countries, including the United States, could become even smoother. This could establish near real-time sharing of military activity info in places like the East China Sea, South China Sea, and around Taiwan. Defense cooperation is also growing. Japan is now pushing for a full-scale entry into overseas markets for the first time since recently easing its weapons export regulations. The Philippines is looking at acquiring Abukuma-class ships from the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force and may also introduce more CC-90 aircraft. For Japan, it can expand its defense industry export market, and for the Philippines, there is the advantage of being able to strengthen its Navy and Air Force at a relatively low cost. The reason both countries are hurrying to cooperate like this is because of the presence of China. Japan and the Philippines didn't name China in their joint statement, but said they oppose any unilateral moves to change the status quo in the East and South China Seas. This is effectively being interpreted as a message aimed at China. Japan also considers the 2028 Philippine presidential election important. There is an effort to sign many agreements and formalize cooperation while maintaining a pro-US and pro-Japan stance. Collaboration is growing in both security and economic sectors. The two countries are strengthening key mineral and energy supply chains, and Japan will support expanding the Philippines' energy storage through a major financial aid program for Southeast Asia. But there's an even more important point here. What Japan is focusing on right now is building a security network to keep China in check. If you look at Japan's recent diplomatic and security policies, it's no exaggeration to say that almost every move is heading in this direction. Japan is quickly increasing security cooperation with Australia, the UK, India, and the Philippines, building on its US alliance. Japan is adding more partner countries in key waters where the Chinese Navy moves into the Pacific and South China Sea. Japan is deepening its US alliance and boosting joint training and defense industry ties with Australia. Japan and the UK have signed a reciprocal access agreement, allowing their militaries to operate more easily in each other's countries. The India relationship deserves close attention. Japan views India as central to its Indo-Pacific strategy, expanding cooperation in maritime security, supply chains, and defense. India, which is experiencing border disputes with China, also places great importance on cooperation with Japan, so the relationship between the two countries is steadily strengthening. From Japan's perspective, all of this cooperation is not seen as separate issues. Japan believes Chinese military activities are expanding from the East China Sea to the entire Pacific and South China Sea. Therefore, instead of cooperating with just one specific country, Japan is pursuing a security network that connects multiple countries. In fact, Japan's recently emphasized free and open Indo-Pacific strategy is also an extension of this concept. In Japan, more people now believe a Taiwan contingency is no longer just a distant regional conflict. Japanese government and security experts are increasingly aware that a military conflict in the Taiwan Strait could directly impact Japan's security. In fact, several islands located at Japan's westernmost point are very close to Taiwan, and the main maritime routes also pass through this area. From Japan's perspective, the stability of the Taiwan Strait is directly linked to its own economy and security. Therefore, Japan has steadily increased military investment and infrastructure in the southwestern islands in recent years. In the past, the units stationed there were relatively small, but they are gradually being expanded, and various surveillance systems and communication facilities are also being established at the same time. Japan officially explains that these measures are not aimed at any specific country, but China is reacting very sensitively to them. Chinese military experts believe Japan's actions are preparations for a possible Taiwan Strait contingency. China is increasingly focused on Japan's growing military cooperation with the United States. Japan is investing a lot of resources to improve its joint operational capabilities with the US military, and is also strengthening various training exercises and the integration of command systems. From China's perspective, these changes inevitably appear to be more than just building a simple defensive system. They seem to be laying the groundwork for possible intervention in the Taiwan issue in the event of a contingency. Chinese state-run media and military experts are harshly criticizing Japan's role in the Taiwan issue and repeatedly issuing warnings. Comprehensively reviewing Japan's security policy, military deployments, and cooperation with allies shows that Japan sees the Taiwan crisis as a key security concern. China is also closely watching this trend, and there are predictions that the strategic competition between Japan and China over the Taiwan issue is likely to become even more intense in the future.